yes. Welcome in to Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, PDLA Podcast, and the second best chance of winning a championship in Philadelphia podcast. Because don't forget, my friends, two of the people on this panel, which we bring on right now, two people on this panel predicted your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles to win the Super Bowl, and one did not. That person will remain nameless because we don't want to embarrass Anthony. So welcome in. I mentioned that it is the team that has the second best odds because the Phillies ain't doing jack this year. The Sixers can't stay healthy. So why not put a little bit of hope in the Philadelphia Flyers? And gentlemen, as much as we've enjoyed covering the team this year, we are now entering a break that none of us wanted to sign up for, a break that none of us truly believe in. But we somehow have to act like we care about the four nations. And we're going to get there, and any ramifications. There are rumors swirling that this might be a great time for teams to engage in the trade market, especially given some of the issues of Canadian players getting their paperwork in the U.S. of late. But gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing great here, Russ. Big Super Bowl win for the Eagles the other day, which was a ton of fun. Everybody could see the city. I love seeing how the city comes together with a big championship like that, and they're getting ready for the parade on Friday. But I could tell my own kids how excited they were, and so it was a great start to the week. And then with the hockey on a break right now, Four Nations Cup about to begin. It's going to be a busy week in Philadelphia, and I'm feeling great. It was a great night the other night, and here we are on Tuesday, and it's a great day. We get to talk a little bit about some hockey with the Flyers and maybe some other stuff that's coming down the pike as well.
Anthony.
Hey,
there's a question, by the way.
Yeah, what's that?
In the comments. Linda Joseph asks, did Ann have to wear flannel because the Birds won? This was not a bet.
No.
I don't know if I've ever seen you wear a flannel.
No, it's a little chilly. We're going to have some snow later, so.
Bundy has a flannel on his chair. You and I are both wearing flannel.
I went flannel.
Is there a P word that we can use for flannel?
PH, flannel. Flannel.
Flannel. The flannel podcast. Flannel. We need it to have that kind of that P pop.
Yeah.
For the intro. We'll get there anyway.
You'll find something. Okay.
So,
it'll come up. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I'll be at the parade Friday. It'll be fun.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything that you'd like to say?
No.
You didn't believe in the Birds?
I didn't think they would win the game, and they did. They were fantastic. Defensively, they were unbelievable. They were great. Played a fantastic game. Yeah. I mean, I picked them every game leading up to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's not like I sat there and was a doubter. I just thought it was going to be a close game, and usually in a close game, the team with the better coach and quarterback wins. The team with the better coach and quarterback, they shit the bed.
Ooh.
They really did, both the coach and the quarterback.
They did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the coach did not call a good game. The quarterback had the worst game of his career.
Well, it's really hard to go out there and throw the ball around.
There's no question. I mean,
you're behind the line. They can't.
I mean, look, if he throws two bad picks that change the game.
Yeah.
I mean, really. So
I'm not gonna lie. I knew the game was over for sure when I saw Travis Kelce with that suit on. I immediately looked and I said, I don't know who's betting on this in this here, but put everything you have on the Eagles. Nobody shows up at a fucking Super Bowl dressed up like a clown like that and expects your team to win. Made it all about him. It was nothing about the team, which it was before. It was all about him.
And unlike last week, where it took like 55 minutes, we're less than 5 minutes, and we got the first Bundy bomb.
That's your first. That's your
but
first rule
now,
of
you know what I will say though about, and we'll move into hockey conversation in just 1 second.
Do we have to? It's Four Nations. No, okay.
Well, no, but the one thing I will say is if the Chiefs would have won, the one thing that would not have happened on this show today is I would not have come in here and said I told you so.
Yeah, you would have.
Certain people feel the need to do that,
No.
But I would.
I didn't do that to you.
No, and I appreciate it.
We've done.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean we're of a certain generation where you don't have to be the yappy dog. You don't hear Russ. You know what we should ask Russ. You know what we should ask him?
What should you ask?
When are we going to get the update on where the standings are on our Flyers picks?
I have them from Allison for the.
No. Where are our standings?
Well,
And the reason, you know why we're not getting them? You know why we're
Because
not getting
I'm
an update?
busy
Last year we
NBA.
got it regularly because Russ won.
I'm busy. I'm a very busy.
You know
human
why
being.
we're not getting?
We all
updates
have
on?
access to the same numbers.
Russ is-
Also,
Russ is in last place.
am I?
Yes,
Did you compile them?
I did.
So what are the standings?
You like to make the nice.
The
graphic.
intern has been on
Yeah.
top of them.
Okay, well then we'll have the intern updated then.
Okay.
At the next time we're together.
How far bad?
You're not way back.
I have not looked.
You're not way back, but
truthfully
you
have not
are.
looked.
But you are at the bottom.
I'm at the bottom.
Yes.
That's okay. That's exactly where I belong and where the Flyers belong, at the bottom. And you know what? We are in a race to the bottom, boys. Okay. Can we feign excitement for the Four Nations?
No.
I have not.
I'm not
going
gonna fake it.
I have not heard a single person that I respect in the hockey world fairly or truthfully say how excited they are for this tournament. And it seems like players have been dropping like flies. We know that Quinn Hughes will not be in the lineup for the U.S. There is a question, or at least as of Friday, I was listening to Jeff Merrick's podcast on the way in, that Crosby might miss the first game, but it wants to play. Rasmus Ristolainen, if you're looking for the Philly angle here, Risto is not going to play.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I mean, we can have a conversation here about concern or not. It was thought that Risto's injury was very minor.
It is a minor injury.
But then, usually hockey players, Bundy, you could probably give us a little bit of insight here, but typically when a player has the opportunity to represent their country, they do typically play through small injuries, I think. Is it because it's the Four Nations and not the Olympics?
Yeah.
Is it like, where would you land there if you had as Ant calls it, a minor injury?
If I had a hangnail, I wouldn't play.
Get out.
I swear to God, it'd be like
Because it's Four Nations?
yeah, but I mean, it doesn't even like I told you before. I said 3 months ago, you have got to get more than just an attaboy for winning. Like attaboy, you guys won the Four Nations with like 4 other nations that aren't even there.
Yeah.
That comprise the makeup of the National Hockey League. So I'm just telling you, like it feels almost like it's an all-star. I think the way it's been treated leading into it now, with guys dropping and like these kind of like injuries, like we're not tweaking it. I'm just saying to myself, like, what's the point? Like, what do you win out of it? It's nice. I've represented my country before. It's a great honor. It really is. And I don't mean it like that. But I'm saying there's nothing beyond just getting a little pat on the back for winning it and saying that's what you get. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit too hard, but I've not heard one person really come out and say this is going to be just a dynamite tournament. It's unbelievable for the game. How do we continue to sell this? No, I'm not hearing that at all. I'm hearing like, okay, let's get this over with so guys can resume the extremely busy schedule they have in March and April.
Yeah, what people fail to, when I should say people fail to recognize, because some people probably do recognize, but what people need to realize here is this is a completely a PR move by the National Hockey League and the National Hockey League Players Association. This is not an international tournament by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even being recognized by IIHF, not that they are a super body to,
right.
But whatever. I mean, their rules don't apply most of the time. I mean, when guys you can't compete in international ice hockey competition. Okay, great. Like people don't really care, right? What they say. But the reality of it is this is just a function of the league, and it's being used to replace the All-Star game this year.
Yep.
And that's all it is. And so the idea of shutting down your league for 2 weeks for an exhibition tournament where the best players in the league are playing, but they're expected to play hard, unlike an all-star game where they could well get hurt and then impact your league's finish, is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Completely mind-boggling.
All right, so let me kind of rip up the format of the show here for a second, because I'll propose this to you guys. So, Bundy, you said, you don't want to just go play for an attaboy. To me, this is, while, yes, it replaces the All-Star game, there's part of me that goes, the NHL looked at what the NBA did with the in-season tournament, and while it was mostly panned last year, there was something about the final few rounds, and a lot of that is because there was a financial incentive. So in the NBA in-season tournament, teams that qualify for the quarterfinals get a $50,000 bonus per player. When you make it to the semifinal, it's $100,000 per player. And if you win the NBA Cup, each player gets a $200,000 bonus. Should the Four Nations Cup, should that have included some kind of a financial bonus? It can't be
sure
that,
there
can't
is.
be that
Is there
high. There's
not?
more players, but I don't know. If it is, like, it's not even a
I
thing
mean,
that's,
like I said,
moved
I'm sure for the
needle
players.
in a meaningful way.
I mean, guys are like, starting to kind of reconsider if they have an injury and they're kind of dropping out of it now. I don't know what would be in it. I mean, there has to be some financial incentive to the players. I don't know that though, but I'm just guessing.
I'm gonna look because I don't think there is.
Yeah, well then just for the love of the game then.
For the love of the game.
And that's the part where Anthony's saying, like, could you imagine Edmonton having a guy like McDavid, like where their fortunes hinge upon a guy like Connor McDavid staying healthy, being healthy down the stretch, being at his best, and going to this thing, and even if he got a minor injury by accident, that's the end of the Edmonton Oilers season because of this tournament.
Yeah.
Would the NHL have been better off? I don't like the idea, and I don't like the NBA Cup. Big basketball fan, but I don't like the NBA Cup. But would the NHL have been better off trying to devise a plan that was similar? Like if the idea here is like the money grab and trying to add additional onus on the importance of like going after those regular season points, would it have made sense for the NHL to look at some version of an in-season tournament?
I don't think so, because the one thing I could say is when you compare hockey to basketball, international competition in hockey matters, right? Like I'm not saying it doesn't matter in basketball, but the NBA is bigger than international basketball.
Correct.
International hockey, though, when you're playing best on best, country versus country, and it means something, whether it's the World Championships or the Olympics or even the World Cup, which they used to do every 4 years or whatever.
We'll talk about that in a second because I was talking to some guys the other day that played in that.
Yeah.
And at that alumni game last week.
Yeah.
They think that's the NHL is going to do it. That's the model to do it.
Correct.
Because the star players, they don't really compete in training camp anyway. Like they're going through the motions in an exhibition game.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, it kind of brings people into the. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, it's fine.
Brings people into the spirit of the hockey season to start. Then
yes,
it chops a little bit out of baseball and football, right? So they get like the World Cup. So if you put 6 teams in it, let's say there's 6 teams. Or you figure whatever it is, even if you get to 8 teams, you do it for that 2 weeks in early September, and that kind of launches your NHL season. There was a lot of excitement about that. That was probably some of the best international hockey that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, like if you're doing that, then that matters to the hockey community.
Yes,
right. But doing it like this, where it's half-assed, it's only 4 countries, and that there's no reward for it.
Right.
It's just a PR grab, and I think the players, even though the PA signed off on this, I think the players recognize it. It's like, well, shit, our teammates are off on the islands having a nice vacation in the middle of the season, and we have to play in this exhibition tournament to make the league happy. Like, if you have an opportunity to get out of it with a minor injury, you get out of it with a minor injury. I'm just saying, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. So, like, I think that's where the NHL gets it wrong. And the comparison what Bundy was talking about with the World Cup, one that really works is World Baseball Classic. Yeah. Like, that does really well in March. Now, I know pitchers aren't up to speed really at that point, and so you got to use a ton of pitchers because the starters can only really go like 3 innings at that juncture. But the reality of it is that was some. Look at the excitement that caused when you had USA versus Japan in the championship and everybody was watching Ohtani versus Trout. Like at the end, like that was the big thing and everybody wanted to pay attention to it. That's good for the sport, and those players are trying to win that for their country. That's what having a tournament like this at the start of the NHL season would do to vault into the season as opposed to breaking it up in February.
Can I pitch a psychotic idea?
Sure,
but it's one that I love. Okay. One thing that I think soccer does really well is club tournaments, the idea of the Champions League, that you get qualifiers, the top finishers in the EPL, Serie A, Bundesliga, La Liga, etc., right? They all play the best club teams against one another. Now, that is sprinkled throughout the season. It's spread out, kind of mitigates the risk of guys not being fully in form, fully healthy. You don't run the risk of as much of a significant injury because the guy's not loosened up or whatever. Could you ever foresee a scenario where the NHL, the KHL, and a few other leagues in the world, maybe run by the governing body of IIHF, says, yeah, you know what, like, why don't we do a tournament throughout the season? And we say, like, the top 2 teams in each conference, the KHL gets a certain number of qualifiers, and they run a tournament either throughout the season or they do pick a time within the regular season where they say, all right, let's figure out who the best team in the world is? Or is it something where, like, the NHL doesn't want to run the risk of their team not being the best? The KHL, same thing. Do you think it's just
No.
the
I think it's
politics
more
are
than
just
that.
too much?
I think it's more than that.
Okay.
I think that these players, you're paying them top dollar. Well, for the sport of hockey, obviously not compared to other sports, but you're paying them top dollar. You don't want them getting hurt in a tournament against other leagues. Could I see that being a potential after the season, replacing the world? Like, there's that World Championships, right?
Yeah,
which you played
it's
in.
a huge deal to the Euros and the
It
Russians.
is.
It's a massive deal.
But what I'm saying is that maybe could I see that and say, okay, we're going to have the best teams from all these different leagues play each other in June in a World Championship instead of, but not in season. Like the NHL would never let the season be broken up to play teams from the KHL or the Swiss League or whatever. I mean, you're not going to, it's the NHL teams are going to win all the time anyway.
Yeah.
The best players are playing here. Like,
I mean, there is a chance of an upset at some point.
Well, I don't know.
Flyers
went over and like lost to that team in Europe a few years ago when they played before the regular season
they
started.
tied, didn't they? Or
They lost.
did they lose that game?
They lost.
That was in Switzerland, right?
It was in Switzerland.
Lugano.
Yeah, Lugano.
Lugano, right?
Oh, that's
Whatever.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just part of me that thinks, like, anytime a league is an international league, right? And you can make a case in basketball, but especially with hockey, like, there are so many good nations. To me, it's always like felt like a missed opportunity that they don't have something like that at the club level. I get the international level, get the idea of playing for your country. That's something totally different. It's interesting. I mean, it's just a point here. Now, a lot of people in the comments here, and Ann, I don't know as we go here if there's anything that you want to pull up here on the screen from the fine folks, but
well, a lot of people talking about remembering, and this is before your time, Russ, but Bundy and I both remember it well, the original World Cup in '96, and it was played here. Some of the games were played here when it actually opened this building.
Yeah, Canada, U.S.
Canada, U.S., and that game, boy, that was when Leclerc
really came into his own.
Yeah, I mean, he was unbelievable in that, and he had, I think he scored either the game tying or game winning goal. I forget which it was, but and Canada ended up winning it in best of three. And they won in 3 games.
Did the U.S. won it?
Or U.S. won it in 3 games.
Yeah,
3 games,
the U.S.
right?
won the World
U.S. won in 3 games, right? But it was 1 game here, 2 games in Montreal, right? I believe the final. I think it was.
It was U.S. beat them for sure.
Yeah, but 1 game was here.
It was,
and 2 were in Montreal.
Is that right? Okay, yeah.
Pretty sure that's what it was.
I know 1 was here for sure. Canada definitely played the U.S. here.
Yes, yeah, and that was something else. Like that was the first time they did it in '96. You got to remember, I mean, the stars that you had back then, and
it was crazy.
It was unbelievable, and I felt like those players cared, like because you were coming off of. Wasn't it that they didn't the pros had not played yet in the Olympics at that point, right?
They had not. 94 was the last year, so 98 would have been 2 years after
the first time that the pros played in the Olympics. So this was the first real international tournament, aside from World Championships, but even that is only certain guys go because of who's in the playoffs and who's not. This was the first real best on best international hockey tournament, and so maybe I think that's why there was so much ramped up for it. But that '96 World Cup was unbelievable hockey, and it was played in September. So
Canada Cups used to be played.
Yeah, well, that was back in the day. That was way back. The Canada Cup in the '70s and '80s. But even that was really just Canada and Russia, and a lot of I mean, nobody else really competed. For those 2 top spots. But yeah, that was the first time that put the U.S. really on the map. Mike Butts is saying U.S. won it in Montreal. He believes Game 2 was here. I think he's right. I think Game 2 they lost here, but I lost in overtime. I think Leclerc scored the tying goal in regulation with like 10 seconds left.
Okay, and
then they lost in overtime, and then they won up in Montreal to win the tournament. I think that's what it was. But yeah, like that kind of tournament, would I get excited for that? I would. Mm-hmm. Like that would be great hockey.
Is there any chance that the 4 nations ends up over-delivering? Like we have, in fairness, like we have the bar so unbelievably low.
No,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
No, because I also don't like the format. It's 4 teams. You play each other once, and then all 4 teams advance. Like, what the hell's the point in playing each other once?
This will just to play right a single elimination right away.
Play the 2 games and be done with it.
If you lose tomorrow night, you're done.
Right? Like, what's the whole point of playing 3 games just for seeding?
For seeding.
Come
It's
on.
important. It's
That's so
important.
stupid. That's like what they did at the beginning of the bubble.
Bubble, yeah.
I'm-
Where the Flyers ended up with the number 1 seed. because
And everybody,
they're
and the other
like,
teams
yeah,
were just kind of like, yeah, we're just kind of getting our feet back under us, right? Like, that's really what they were doing. I don't like the format a little bit. So,
So I guess we can move off of the 4 nations.
yes.
Now, there is something that I am.
The fact that we
excited
did 16 minutes of 4 nations is
about. My
fascinating.
friends, that's called talent. That's called skill. That's called the ability to vamp. Okay. Now, there is something that I find very interesting in this. And of course I do because I'm, resident Chihuahua jackass. But one of the things that has been perplexing, and we talked about this on the Press Row show the other night, but Peltier's paperwork taking so long, even like relative to, and Kuzmenko's took a while as well. The fact that there seems to be that issue with the players coming from Canada to U.S. teams and trades and the paperwork delays happening. Jackie Spiegel, friend of the show, was on. She had talked to an immigration attorney. I think she was working on. She had put out a story. She was working on something else as well. But it sounds like there were some things that were at the end of the Biden administration and then with Trump coming in that like it has made things more complicated in getting players processed. With that said, you're about to enter you're in the midst of a 2-week break here for 4 nations. There is no roster freeze in the NHL. In my thought process, like this would be a perfect time to try to execute a trade, especially since the players aren't playing, especially because you don't have to worry about guys maybe missing games. Could you see a potential flurry of activity in the episode title? I questioned trade frenzy. Could we see a bunch of moves while the hockey world's kind of standing still with the 4 nations going on?
No.
You don't think there's going to be any trades? You don't think there is going to be, like, are we going to say?
No, I'd be surprised if there is.
Why? What the hell's the point?
Because really, you want to see where guys are when they come back. You want to see if there's maybe a player you've looked at who maybe was banged up. How does he look in the 2 weeks he comes back after this? I know,
Right.
Russ, you want everything. You want there to be a trade every day. Like, I mean, you do. You're like, you wish pro sports was fantasy sports,
Big
right? I
trade
mean,
guy.
yeah, you are.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is I think that there's going to be a lot of leadership eyeballs on that tournament. Maybe get some scouts going to the AHL, looking at games down there. You're still looking at junior hockey stuff going on, and you're going to get together and you're going to talk. Usually they have the scouts kind of get together the week before the deadline and say, okay, what do we really like here? And then go into that last week into the deadline is when it really hits.
So if I set the over-under on trades at 1.5, would you take the over, or would you still, or is it really going to be 1 or 0?
From now till the end of the year?
No, from now until the end of the 4 nations. Over under 1.5.
I'll go under.
So you think it's going to be 0 or 1?
Yeah.
Okay, Bundy, over under.
Well, I don't dive into it as much as Anthony, but I'm going to go under because I just think it's really hard. I mean, you just can't go trading your whole roster.
Yeah, I just don't see it happening.
I don't mean for the Flyers. I mean for the league as a whole.
I just don't. I don't.
You really
I really
just
don't
think there's
see
not
it.
gonna be any movement?
I think you'll see some movement as soon as it's over. Once the games are back on again in a week and a half, I think then you're going to see teams be active at that point. I don't think you're going to see anything while this 4 nations thing is going on.
I'm taking the over.
And I'll tell you another reason why.
Go ahead.
Just like compare this to the Stanley Cup, right? This is, again, we talked about this as a league event, right?
Yeah.
How many times do you hear that the league doesn't want teams announcing trades or anything during the Stanley Cup Finals because they don't want any news taking away from their big event?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want any news taking away from their big event. So you're not. It's probably one of those kind of quietly unwritten rules, like, hey, don't make any trades during the 4 Nations tournament.
So would you say that like within the day or I forget what the actual schedule is, what the gap is between the final and the next game? Let's say it's 2 or 3 days. Is that where the trades end up happening?
No, they'll happen once.
You're saying like not until a puck drops in the NHL again.
After it's over. After the tournament is over. So whenever the final is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Though, like
whatever
so
the
2 or
la-
3 day,
I think
day
the last
window.
game is next Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day it is. It won't happen until after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Just saying.
Okay. There's something that I know you were working on. There was a story that you were working on, and it is about a player who is no longer here, but is still a player in this league. And I don't want to disrupt the flow or the potential views that your story will get, but I'm sure you'll dive more into.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to have this story published before we recorded today. As it turns out, it's going to be out just after lunch. So you guys will hear it first here on Snow the Goalie, and then you'll be able to read it later on Pattison. I have a story that I put together that just kind of diving into the Flyers leading up to the trade deadline, like what's next, talking about guys like Lawton and Ristolainen and, looking ahead at the assets that the Flyers have and what they might be looking for in return, et cetera, et cetera. And, we talked about 2 games ago, we had Adam Kimmelman on and we talked a little bit about the Flyers scouting Fraser Minton from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he talked about him a little bit because the Leafs, we've known for a while now, been interested in Scott Lawton, but they don't have a first-round pick. Danny would like to get more than a second-rounder for Lawton, so this is kind of where that conversation started from. As you know, I've been talking to a lot of people within the organization to see where things are at, and one of the things that I've been able to glean is that before the trade with Calgary, the Flyers were talking to Anaheim. They've been talking to Anaheim for a while. They've been keeping tabs on the whole availability of Trevor Zegras. I would say Danny probably first reached out to Pat Verbeek about that player leading up to last year's trade deadline. The asking price at that time was just ridiculous. It was, there's a reason he wasn't traded. The asking price was off the charts. I know Danny checked back in with him again in June, right before the draft, to see if there was something that would make sense. The asking price was still way too high at that point. Before the trade with Calgary, checked back again, and they started talking about Joel Farabee. The Ducks were interested in Farabee. They had interest in Farabee. There would have had to been more, I think, to the trade, and whether or not they ever would have gotten it across the finish line, I don't know. Ultimately, the Ducks backed out of the trade because they weren't necessarily comfortable with taking the full Farabee salary. They would have preferred that the Flyers eat a little bit of it in the trade, but Danny was not willing to do that because he's like, well, listen, Zegras hasn't looked good for 2 years, and all of a sudden we're going to eat salary and not know, we're going to take on his salary, which is $6 billion a year, right? Like, no, I'm not doing that. So that didn't end up happening. Anaheim probably wanted a first-round pick that Danny was not willing to give up for a guy like Zegras, again, who for 2 seasons now, he's had some injuries. He had a broken ankle last year, and then he had a knee injury this year, so he's missed some time. But his production has dropped off after his first 2 years in the league. And even in his second year, when he had his highest point total of 68 points, his two-way game was just not there.
Right.
Not a good defensive player, right? So you look at that situation, if you're the Flyers, and say, do we want to really give up all these assets for a guy who maybe is not, at the top of his game or hasn't been for a while? And somebody that I had talked to in the organization said, look, guys have a bad year. Guys have a bad year and a half. He says, Zegras is kind of going into a third bad year here. Like, how do you weigh the risk versus the value, right? There. And so it ended up not happening. I don't think that there's anything left there. I think that any kind of deal would potentially be dead unless Anaheim really, really dropped the value of Zegras, because I don't see Briere giving up a first-round pick for him, or another player on the roster.
Right.
There was also some thought that Anaheim might like Cam York, but I'm not sure that you give up Cam York for Zegras as well at this point, because then you got to replace York. Mm-hmm. You're basically filling one hole by creating another. Yeah. And I don't know if you go that path either. So Is it
bad that I'm not sold on York? Like, am I crazy? I feel like he's had some good moments this season. I felt like he had good moments last season, but I don't see top pair defenseman in Cam York, and I'm not exactly sure that I see the rock of even a second pair. I think he can be like the second guy on the second. I don't see it right now.
It's an interesting thing with York, because York is an analytics darling. If you look at his analytic numbers, Bundy,
They're great.
jumps off the page, like some of the best in the league.
Right.
Like you look at it and go, like if I didn't put the name on it and said, look at these numbers, you would go, that's a pretty good defenseman right there. That's a really good defenseman. But then when you watch him play, the eye test changes things because you sit there and go, I just wish there was more to him.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're as a defenseman, former defenseman, you see it maybe better than any of us do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Like, what is there another level to his game? And we haven't seen it. Like, he's good. He had a much better year last year than he has this year. I don't want to take anything away from him, but again, I don't know his relationship necessarily with Torts and how that goes. But he's a guy I think that they think, and other teams watching him probably feel like there's another gear there that we haven't seen yet. And I think that's kind of the hesitancy. But I don't pay a lot of attention in the analytics department. I'm an eye test guy when I watch him. And some nights he's been very good. And other nights it's not as good.
Right.
But, I mean, that's also part of growing as a young defenseman and trying to figure out your groove and find that groove.
Yeah. But so the overall point of this conversation, that you talk about this whole trying to work out a deal for Zegras with Farabee. It's obvious that Danny is looking for centers.
Right.
And he's even probably willing to take on somebody that you look at as a change of scenery candidate kind of player. Say, hey, listen, we know that there's talent there, and it's obviously the ceiling for Zegras is a lot higher than Joel Farabee probably was, right? But if you don't, you have to decide how much you're willing to gamble on that. Because if it doesn't work, now you've just saddled yourself with another bad contract, which you don't want to do in this.
Although it's not that bad. I mean, the Zegras deal is 5.75 this year and next year, and then he hits RFA.
Right. But
So then the question, I guess, at that point becomes: do you gamble? So if it is this year, like say there is a trade to be made there, which based on what you're saying, doesn't sound like there is. Just say conceptually they go out and they make a deal for him this year. All right, so you get to watch probably 20 or so games, maybe a little bit less, with this team, with Tortorella. God knows what happens next year. We assume Torts is probably the coach again next year. Does it work? He gets another year in that system. Does Torts get something out of him? I mean, it seems like the odd couple. It certainly seems like a relationship that on paper should not work, but Torts has managed to pull great out of guys that you wouldn't expect him to do that with. You get yourself 20 games plus another season, and then you make a decision when he hits RFA, if he's worth it or not. And maybe there's another team out there at that point who says, you know what, we'll take the gamble. Like, it didn't work with the Flyers. I don't know. I guess it really does depend on what the price is. If it's Cam York's about to hit RFA now. I mean, at the end of the season. He makes $1.6 million currently. They're going to re-sign him. It's just a matter of, like, are you going to overpay?
I don't think you're going to overpay, but you're probably going to pay in the neighborhood of 4.5.
Yeah,
I'm saying it's probably, I don't know, does he get a bridge deal before he gets his bigger one?
I don't even know what a bridge deal is anymore.
But I'm saying like a shorter,
with the cap going up, it wouldn't actually surprise me if you're the player if you do consider a bridge deal because of the cap going up.
Yeah, but I'm saying, if you're York's agent, are you sitting there going, we'll take 2 years at $9 million, and then knowing 2 years from now what that cap situation is going to be, you'll probably can then sign that 6-year
for like a 6.5 AAV
or even
higher.
You're asking the player to
really
they'll put a lot into the next 2 years, because if they're giving him a bridge deal, they don't feel like he's the guy that give a long-term deal yet.
Yeah.
So if your agent tells you, you know what, take a bridge deal, but go play your ass off, I think that everything like that would be just fine.
I just think it's a tricky, like, this is one of those player calls that I don't envy being in Danny Briere's position.
Yeah.
Because if you get it right and you do sign him to a 5-6 year deal or whatever at, say, 4.75, $5 million cap hit. Well, if he ends up blossoming into being a guy who maybe could touch a top pair, that's a great deal, especially with the cap going up. But I think that the likelihood there is significantly higher that he is a second pair defenseman in a best case scenario. And then you start to wonder down the line, was he another player that you needed to extend at that money? Like, certainly they should not encourage having a no movement clause here, right? Like, it's give him the money, give him the years if you feel like it's going to be a worthwhile investment. But they're clearing all this money. They've done a good job of it. I don't necessarily want to see them then go and give money to a player that's unproven. And I would say that to this point, he is unproven. You really don't know what he is, and there's a higher likelihood, I think, that it ends up looking maybe like an overpay to try to retain a player. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a tough call on York. I think that
I don't think he's a bad player. Like, to be clear, I don't think he's a bad player.
And I think that they would consider a trading York
At the deadline?
No,
Or like
hold.
Okay.
If they got the value that they feel in return. Like if you're getting a known entity and Cam York has to be the piece that gets you that top line center, for example, that you've been craving for and everybody's craving for.
Sure.
And you know it's that guy. You know you're not taking a chance like you would with Zegras, but you're getting a guy that comes in and, oh yeah, this guy's going to be our number one center. We're happy with that. I think then that's part of an outside the box hockey trade that you say, okay, yeah, we have to fill that hole now, but I'd rather fill that hole than have to keep chasing for a top line center. Whereas if it's not that, you hold on to York because he's still young and he's still developing and you still think there could be more there. So I think that that's ultimately probably how you make that call. I do think a bridge deal is more likely. Danny's done that in the past, or he's tried to do that in the past. I know he was involved with the Morgan Frost deal that was 2 years, right? So you looked at a guy like Morgan Frost and you said, okay, we like the guy, but we're not yet ready to commit to him long term. Let's do that shorter term deal and see where he's at, at how he develops over the next 2 years. And then they traded him. So they were right to kind of pause and not give him a longer term deal like they did to Farabee before that. I think that Cam York probably fits. It's probably a better fit for the Flyers to have him on that bridge deal rather than give him that 5-6 year contract and see where he goes, because he could get better, right, Bundy? I mean, he still has some upside. I think the thing that I wish Cam York had a little bit more of is a little bit more snarl.
Yeah, a little bit more growl to his game.
Yeah, like I mean that
he's a SoCal guy.
Yeah, he is.
He's a California kid.
You and I talked about this in the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah.
It's more of a let the game come to him than him going out and grabbing it by the throat.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot there to like. I just wish that he had that little extra bit of killer instinct, really. Yeah. And I think that would elevate his game. And who knows, maybe it never will be there. Maybe that's just his personality and it never will be there. But I don't think you give up on it just yet, just to say that it's, it'll never show up. He's still young enough that it could.
Bundy, if we take no movement clauses out of this, okay, using your eyes and your experience, is there anybody on this blue line right now that if you were the GM of the team, you would say is essentially untradeable? Like a guy that you would not move?
Again, Russ, it goes back to the fact of you have a certain amount of guys in your team. You can't trade everybody.
Mm-hmm. Like if a team calls about
if a team calls and says for Sanheim, right? This is hypothetical. Take the no movement out, right? Whatever, however it goes. I don't think Danny can just hang the phone up and say, "Oh no, he's absolutely not available." You have to listen to calls. Let's put it this way: there's not one defenseman on this Flyers team that you won't listen to another GM at least kind of talk to you about that player or throw some ideas at you about that player. Like, put it this way. If you called Colorado and asked about Cale Makar, they would just tell you, sorry, we have no interest in trading him at all.
Yeah. The
Flyers don't have that player. There's not one guy that Danny will say, no, we have no interest in trading him. There's every defenseman here, you will absolutely have to listen to that.
But let me throw it to you in another way.
Yeah.
Because in all honesty, I think it's fair to say that the strength of this Flyers team currently is their defense.
Their structured defense.
Structured defense,
yes.
Right? Okay. So with that said, knowing this group plays well together within that structure, are you more hesitant to move players from this group because they play so well within the structure together?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think that you're not just going to trade a guy because he's playing well inside the way the defensive thing is. When I look at the Flyers team, it's not necessarily the individual defenseman. It's the way the team plays defensively with the forwards incorporated into it with the defenseman. I'm just saying when I look individually at it, if you're saying is Sanheim their best defenseman? Of course he is. But are you not willing to listen to a call if someone says, hey, we have a ton of interest in him and here's what we're thinking. If you have Makar, I mean, I guess, Wayne Gretzky got traded, right? Many years ago. Yeah. Everybody's available. I get it. I understand what that means. But if you're going to call a guy and say, like, you're talking about a guy like Makar, you're not really going to listen to that unless the guy's going to say there's something stupid. Like, here, we want to talk to you about Makar, but here's
Connor McDavid. And
here's Connor McDavid. Yeah. Like, well, we're going to whisper that name. That's not going to happen. So you have to be realistic about what the approach is and what really could be gotten and what can't be got. Yeah. I think that's important when you're looking at and evaluating players on other teams.
So that's the defensive core. And just based on the fact that Farabee's name was presumably in the conversation around Zegras, are there any forwards on the team that you think Danny would not really actively listen on?
Mishkov. Konechny, probably. That's about it. I mean, I can't imagine anyone else would be untradeable. I mean, you probably still hear what people are saying about those names, but you're not trading those guys. I do think, and also going to be part of that story that comes out in a little bit. I said, who's, and you asked you asked this question on the Snow the Goalie X account a couple days ago, I think. Who's more likely to be traded at the deadline?
Lawton
or Risto. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, if I remember correctly, the vote from the fans was Risto was the favor there. And I'm going to tell you it's the other way around. I think Lawton is more likely to get traded than Risto. From the conversation,
that was 78.2% said Risto, 21.8% said Lawton.
And I think it's the other way around. Just again, from the people I talked to, there was a hesitancy to move Scott Lawton in the last 2 years because of what they were trying to build as far as the culture of the team. And we've talked about it a million times, so I don't want to rehash it, but in hockey, teams do value the intangibles maybe more than other sports, right? Like, there's a reason teams are, if you look at Scott Lawton's numbers, the fact that Danny can call any one of 15 teams today and get a second-round pick for him, you would sit there and say, why the hell would you trade a second-round pick for a guy who's a bottom six forward, mostly a fourth liner on a championship caliber team? And it's more than the fact that he's, versatile and can play center or wing. It's more than the fact that he can kill penalties. It's more about being a leader and what being a leader means in this sport, that it doesn't necessarily translate so much in other sports. So that's where there's a lot of off-ice value for him. And I think that's why, teams that are trying to win a Stanley Cup. Whoa, Russ, you're taking that off the screen. Don't look at the screen. Now we're seeing Russ's screen. Okay. Thanks, Max.
The video guys are
they're the best.
Sometimes they're almost like when you tell a kid don't touch the stove when it's hot.
And they do.
And it's immediately
don't put your hand in the cookie jar. But anyway, I think that there's more value to him now. And maybe even more value to him, even if they don't trade him at the deadline in going into the offseason and going into his final year. I think there's more value than maybe there has been at any time before. And that's why Danny's held on to this point. But the people that I talked to said that, obviously there was a reluctance before, but the time might be right now to do it. Like they feel like they just did this trade. They traded Farabee and Frost. The locker room wasn't happy about it. Obviously, they were well-liked guys, right? But they're able to handle the change now. Whereas last year they were in a playoff spot at the deadline, and so it's like, well, we're not going to blow up the locker room at the deadline, especially with somebody who helped put this locker room together. 2 years ago, they weren't even anywhere close to ready for losing a team leader. Yeah. But now you just traded two guys and they got over it. So they've survived for 2 weeks, right? They welcomed the new guys in. They seem like, they fit in. Kuzmenko and Pelletier at practice, guys are saying nice things about them and stuff. They're going to survive that. And so maybe now's the time where you can say, okay, Scott Lawton, thank you for everything you've done. You'll always be remembered here. You'll always have a home here. If you ever want to come back here, after your career's over and be a part of this organization, you can be. But now's the time to maybe get something for him. And I think that's more likely. As for Ristolainen, it's basically what we said about York, right? It's a situation where if you trade Risto, you're only going to create a hole that you then have to fill elsewhere, because you're not getting an NHL player for Risto. You're getting draft capital.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and that's great, but it has to you have to do something else to get the player to come in, because the one thing that people tell me is we don't have that player ready to replace him. So you look at Helge Grans, nice prospecty player in the AHL. He's not ready to step into Risto's role. You look at Oliver Bonk and you say, okay, he's the top defensive prospect, but is he ready to step into Risto's role next year? No, he's not. Right. So that's the thing. You have to find that person. Otherwise, you're prolonging your losing even further. If you say, well, let's let those guys and we'll see, and they'll get there eventually. Okay, fine. But now you're pushing this rebuild out another 3, 4, 5 years. I
don't know if it's that far, but yeah, okay.
Oh, no, it is that far. It is that far. Mm-hmm. Oliver Bonk's 20.
No, I get that. But I think that's not taking into account the fact that you clear cap and there's a possibility that you could get a free agent in here.
Yeah,
that could replace Risto. Not this year, but I don't think that trading Risto then punts this thing that far down the line, because you do have other avenues to go out and acquire a player who maybe fits that role. Is that almost? But let's just say that we all agree on that Risto getting moved would actually have a significant impact. I think it would. I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
Is it an indictment on maybe not this front office, but the prior one, that there is nobody ready to take on a role that there's nobody in the system that seems available, ready to kind of plug in. There's nobody even on this roster that theoretically could step in. Isn't that part of the problem? Is just that the farm system really isn't rife with ready talent.
I don't think it's as bad as you're making it out to be.
Yeah, I agree with Anthony.
It's not. I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you they have a top 5 farm system.
Yeah, I'm not saying that everybody is dog shit and they're all worthless.
No, I think the Flyers are probably somewhere in the middle of the pack about where their prospects are compared to other teams in the league. They're probably smack dab in the middle. Could it get better? Sure, but I think it was so bad, and it's when you look at what's coming, it's okay, well, this is starting to get a little bit better. It's starting to look like, you can't knock the fact that you have a Luchenko, a Bonk. What's the tall defenseman kid? Spencer Gill, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Him. You have 2 goalie prospects in Jarnison and Zavragan. You have a couple other guys that are interesting that are maybe that guy can be something, like a Denver Barkey, for example. So you have some other players. So you're not you're sitting there saying the cupboard is completely bare. And these are all guys that have been brought in with this current group. Mm-hmm. So it's okay, they're kind of starting to put that together. Now you have 7 picks in the first 2 rounds next year's draft. That's why we've said all along that's such an important summer for this group. Yeah. That is that whole kind of let's replenish it, let's build it up, so that maybe a year from now, when we're having this same conversation about their farm system, you sit there and go, hey, Flyers have a top 10 farm system in the NHL right now, because of all that, right? So
possible.
It's not there yet, but I think it's got a shot of getting there. I wouldn't say it's bottom of the barrel though by any stretch of the imagination. There are teams. Look at Pittsburgh, for example, right? All that they did to try and compete and try and win, and look, they won 3 Stanley Cups. You can't criticize them too much. They got it done, but they had no picks, and they have no good young prospects, and they're going to be in a bad way for a long time. Flyers aren't there. Flyers aren't that, and then it's not just Pittsburgh. There's other teams like that too. But so yeah,
the Hockey Writers site, which I don't put a lot of stock into, but if you want to, you can. Mm-hmm. They had the Flyers ranked as the 21st farm system in hockey.
It's better.
They highlighted Zavragan, Luchenko, Barkey, Bonk, and Emil Andre as being the 5 standouts. I guess that kind of comes back to we're gonna get hello, season's greetings. We just had a tour almost break into the Snow the Goalie studio.
Yeah, well,
That's what we need.
People couldn't hear earlier, but the Toronto Raptors are practicing currently outside. Yeah. They are loud.
Yeah, they're really loud. We're all the way up here with the door closed. We can still hear them.
They are screaming on the court. They're loud down there. So
good
anyway.
on them. Good on them. That team.
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't go with the.
I'm not saying that's a be all end all. I'm just saying that like that's at least one outlet that views this as being a bottom half of the league farm system.
No.
Now, again, this is where this draft coming up is so interesting because I always go back to like, all right, the Colorado pick, the Edmonton pick, you can maybe package those to get back up into the first round a little bit higher.
Well,
but then there is the thought, do you make those picks at that point, and then maybe those are guys that go to the A and you feel more confident about being able to rebuild that system? Like, I don't know. It's just another thought.
Well, I mean, you got to wait and see, obviously, where everybody finishes, right? To see where whose pick lands where. But one other thing that I would like to say is that I think Danny would prefer any additional draft picks going forward be in 26, just because he's got so many already
he's got a
in
lot.
25.
Yeah.
I think he would take picks that are in 25 and then do exactly what he did a year ago, flip them for 26.
Yeah.
It's like somebody's always going to want something right now and say, all right, we'll give you the same pick next year.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So if it's a late first rounder like they did last year, flip it and get a first rounder this year, he could potentially do the same thing and get an extra pick in 26. So I think that you might see some of that too.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think if he can't get the draft picks in these trades to be in 2026, I wouldn't be surprised if a number of these, at least one or two of these 25 draft picks become 26 draft picks and flips in June.
So the last thing that I wanted to get to, unless you guys have anything else, is what I want to circle back to the Four Nations and look at it just through the Flyers lens. Just through the Flyers lens.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're looking for out of Ersson? I don't believe is going to play. Risto's not playing. So you're really looking at Konechny and you're looking at Sanheim. Is there anything that those guys can do at this tournament that would impress you? Is there anything that you look for?
I'd like to see how. I mean, I'm going to watch when I watch the games. If I watch the games, it's a big if.
I'm going to watch them. I can't believe it's an if.
I'm an if.
You're an if as well.
I'm a really big if.
Let me ask you a question. Actually, we'll come back to it. Go ahead.
I might watch like the championship game or the last couple, whatever. But
intern Andrew's going to watch them. So, are you going to have the spoiler rule in play? Like, you're going to have to declare whether or not you're watching the game or not.
He's been warned twice already.
Not to text you during the game.
Don't text me like you're jumping up and down excitement that USA just beat Finland on a Thursday night.
Yeah, ain't happening. But I'll tell you the one thing that I would like. I think Konechny is going to play a Konechny type game and a Konechny type role. It's going to be interesting to see Sanheim play with better defensemen, how he plays with a better defenseman, and how he plays constantly against the best players from the other. So like I think Sanheim is an interesting player to watch in this tournament. Other than that, I don't think you're getting anything from the Flyers' perspective. You might Torts yelling from the bench. Mm-hmm. All right. Andrew just said he's not going to text you. He's watching.
I just.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, he said he's not going to text you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
By the way, we did a so just so you know, it's kind of funny. We did a Super Bowl block pool as a fundraiser for the theater, and intern Andrew won the first quarter.
Get out.
He did.
How much did he win?
I'm not going to tell you how much he won. I don't want to get
text me on the side.
I'll tell you off air.
Was it a decent amount of money?
It was solid for him. That's good. I won halftime.
Did you win more than he did?
No,
it was the same amount.
Same amount. The end of the game was the only one that was up higher.
Okay.
I almost won the third quarter. It wasn't that last Chiefs touchdown prevented me from winning twice.
It was rigged. It was rigged
at the end of the third quarter.
Huh.
So
in essence, as we kind of zoom back out and we recap the show, no one is looking forward to the Four Nations. There is nothing that can be achieved from this tournament that will make any of us feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
Right.
And you guys both believe that there will be no trades made during the tournament, but perhaps in that gray area between the championship game and the first games being dropped.
Possible.
Yeah.
Possible. I mean, you're only looking at a day or two there, but possibly. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, and we somehow made a 1 hour show out of all that.
We did. And you know what? We had a lot of people in the comments that were going back and forth. Some people are going after each other, which that's part of the fun of the show. But a big thank you to everybody who joined us live on YouTube, X, and Facebook. If you haven't done so already, I don't know what you're waiting for, but subscribe to Snow the Goalie on YouTube. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. If you were watching live, which again, we appreciate you, do us a favor. Once the telecast is over, the broadcast is over, go into the regular comment section. Let us know something that you agree with, disagree with. Just helps the channel. And if you like podcasts, you can, of course, find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find Ant on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. You can find Bundy on Twitter at CTerrien6. You can find me on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. Gentlemen, it has been an honor. It's been a pleasure. It's been a joy.
Oh, fun.
Like that?
And we won't be back until next Tuesday because there's nothing this week.
Unless Danny Briere is feeling frisky out there and makes a deal. But yeah, we'll probably be next Tuesday. I think there's a chance that if people keep their eyes peeled to the Snow the Goalie channel, there may be an interview from the archives going up on the channel. I was able to procure it.
You want to say who?
He's playing in the Four Nations.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know which one it is.
I got that video. It was a very popular video.
That was a good
one. We're gonna finally, I think, debut it on the Snow the Goalie channel.
Good.
So, when you guys see that, there will be a disclaimer in the description about the date that it was recorded, because we don't want people to think that we're sitting down at Skate Zone, you and I. I'm definitely skinnier. Your hair, I think, was a little bit darker. And this guy was a couple years younger as well. So,
yeah.
you know. But check it out over on the YouTube channel. All right. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the Four Nations, because that is ultimately what we all care about in the hockey world. Talk to all of you next Tuesday here on Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast.